Who remembers where we left off with David? Anybody? Killed Goliath. Yep.
His brothers.
Yep. Goliath's brothers. We got to Goliath's brothers. He had
The second war.
let's see, you get my spot here. Where we are at. I think it was like 51. Alright. Yeah. Alright, it's 1 Samuel 17:51. Where we are at. Anybody need I do have extra Bibles here. 1 Samuel 17. Bought some more Bibles, just didn't bring them. First Samuel 17:51 is where we're at. We're going to flip back to 1 Samuel 15 here in a minute. So we'll get started here. Because I want to kind of go back in time in the story and cover a few things so that we can understand what's taking place right now.
What did you say again?
17:51. So up to this point, we talked about David and how his father sent him. David is a shepherd boy, but he's not. But we looked back in 16 and seen he's already kind of known to be a decent warrior, right? He's kind of a younger, good-looking guy. He doesn't look the part, but he's pretty fierce. He's destroyed a lion. He's killed a bear, right? He was so close to the lion that he grabbed the lion by the beard. He should be dead. And he was telling Saul this story, right? I should be dead, but I killed the lion. God spared me from the lion. God spared me from the bear. And David is already known to be not a little sissy boy, right? He's kind of got some grit about him already. But even though he doesn't look the part, he looks like this little pretty boy. He's not a pretty boy. He's pretty tough. So he shows up where the Philistines and the Israelites are gathered together getting ready to battle. And Goliath is out there, remember? He's saying, just send your champion, come face me, we'll go one-on-one. And that way only one person has to die. Everybody doesn't have to die. I'll only kill one person, and then we'll just go ahead and captivate you guys, take you guys captive. And all Israel was afraid of Goliath, right? The whole entire, even King Saul. And remember King Saul? King Saul is a bigger guy. He's not a giant, but he's a taller, bigger guy. The Bible says he was head and shoulders above all the people. Meaning, on the average person in Israel was up to here on King Saul. King Saul was a decently tall dude. He wasn't no 9-foot tall guy or nothing, like Goliath was, but he was a tall guy. He was a bigger guy. Even he was as plumb afraid to death of Goliath, right? Well, David shows up and he hears Goliath just running his mouth and saying all this stuff about the God of Israel and about Israel in general. And David ain't having it, right? David has the spirit of, if he doesn't have the spirit of fear, he has the spirit of the Lord, right? He just kind of gets angry. He's like, hey, what's going on? Like, are we going to let this guy talk like this? And he has that conversation with his brother, and his brother's like, what are you doing here? Get back to the sheep. Get out of here. This ain't for you. And he goes, no, I'm not going to let this guy talk this way. If nobody's going to do something about it, I'll go do something. So, anyways, we see him, and this is where he's at. He gets this. We've already talked about the stones and the 5 brothers, and he gets the stone, and he's running at Goliath. And before he goes after Goliath, remember, he tells all the Philistines, he said, I'm not only going to kill you, I'm killing everybody here. Of course, he doesn't do that. He's kind of running his mouth, right? He's just in the moment. So he just takes off running. And in the process of running, he puts that rock in the sling and slings it right into Goliath's head, right? It sinks right into his forehead, and Goliath falls face first to the ground. Goliath is dead. But David doesn't stop right there. He just keeps sprinting. Runs up, grabs Goliath's sword. Goliath's sword is probably a big sword. Grabs Goliath's own sword and chops Goliath's head off right there, right in front of everybody. It's just like this wild, crazy scene. And this is where we're at in verse 51. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof and slew him and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion dead, they fled. They see this scene of this this young guy shows up, and they're like, oh, what's this guy going to do? And even Goliath is like, what are you guys are just sending me your worst? You just want me to kill the worst of you and just get this over with, huh? I can't believe you guys think no better of me than to send me this little runt. Well, this little runt just goes nuts, right? And just kills him and chops his head off, and he's just, So, and all of the Philistine army like, oh. So they just take off running. They're like, he's after us. Remember, he just told them he's going to kill them all. And they believe it. So they take off running, and Israel takes off running after them, and they don't kill everybody that day. But let's keep going in the story. Verse 52, and the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines. And kind of like what I was talking about last night, those of you who were there. When one person makes a stand, it emboldens more people, right? At first, Israel is afraid to death of these Philistines. But when they see David conquer Goliath, they have some boldness about them, and they go running after the Philistines now. They were afraid. They were shaking in their boots, scared. But now they see David stand up and make a bold stand. They're like, we're not afraid anymore. Yeah, we'll follow this guy. And they just take off running. And the Israelite army chases the Philistine army, as we see. And pursued the Philistines, in verse 52 still, until thou come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Sharon, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. Meaning they just started taking all their stuff, right? Because obviously there was an encampment there, the Philistines. And the Philistines just left all their stuff and just took off running. So the Philistines are taking all their stuff, right? And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son this stripling is. Now, when we get to this part right here, people think that this is a contradiction in the Bible. And we talked about, I don't remember what it might have been last week. We talked about in chapter 16, how, remember Saul gets the evil spirit, and he wants somebody to come play the harp for him, and he calls out, and somebody says, hey, I know this guy named David. He's a great guy. He can come play the harp for you. So what people think this contradiction is in chapter 16, David is in the house of Saul playing the harp for Saul, right? And Saul knows David and knows who he is, but you get to verse 17, David is killing Goliath, and Saul's like, who is this guy? What's this guy's name? Whose son is he? And people are like, well, if he knew him in verse 16, in chapter 16, how come in chapter 17 he has no idea who he is? Well, and this is a pretty simple explanation. And I actually want to go back to 1 Samuel 15 and kind of get the backstory of everything that's taken place, but let me just give you the answer right now. Pretty much the answer is that Saul is a king, and Saul knows tons and tons of people. And David just probably comes into his life for a short time and then goes back to the fields, and he probably just forgets who he is. That's probably the answer, okay? It isn't there's a contradiction or anything. It's just that Saul, that David was in Saul's house just for a short amount of time, and then this could have been a year later. Who knows how long much later this is. Saul probably just forgot who he was. That's the simplest, most logical explanation. Saul just forgot who David was. But I want to jump back to chapter 15, and let's get the backstory of what led up to Saul getting this evil spirit, and Saul, the favor of the Lord departed from Saul, and the Lord didn't want Saul to be king anymore. And this is why we see David entering into the picture in the first place, because God is setting up David to be king. So go back to chapter 15, and starting in verse 1. Samuel also said unto Saul, The Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken thou unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how they laid wait for him in the way, when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not. but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, and camel and ass. And here's what God tells Saul. He tells Saul to slay everybody. Slay the entire compound, the entire city, the entire nation of Amalek. Destroy them all. Do not take them as captives. Do not, because a lot of times when you go to war with one of these nations, Israel goes to war with one of these nations, they take them captive. But there were certain nations that God, back in maybe Numbers or Deuteronomy, God is showing them, hey, these certain nations, these nations that we go after and we clean out the land of Canaan, do not take them captive. They are wicked, wicked people. And we see God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for this very reason, right? Because they were just so wicked and so filthy and so disgusting. And as you go through, I believe it is the book of Numbers. It might be in Leviticus. I think it's in Leviticus. We go through and we see these nations, they're just so wicked. They're just doing like this, the most wicked, abominable stuff. Like, I don't even want to start, the Bible names it, so I guess, you're talking like men with their daughters and uncles and aunts and gays and it's all this older men and younger. They're just wicked. They're just disgusting nations. And this is why God says, wipe them off out of the face of the earth. I do not want them in my people at all. Now, there's other nations that are wicked nations, and they're not following God, but they're not just so terrible that they need to be wiped off the face of the earth, that God says, yeah, you can take them captives and teach them your ways, and they'll probably do okay. But these people are just so gross. They're basically Sodom and Gomorrah made over. Do not take a single one captive. Do not even leave their sheep alive. Destroy them all. And this is what he's saying about Amalek. Because Amalek was among these people, the Amalekites. And he tells Saul, destroy them all. I don't want any of this to survive. I want it all wiped away. And Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in T-Lam, 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and laid wait in the battle. And Saul said unto the Kenites, go, depart, get you down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. So he's telling the Kenites, get out of here before I destroy you with them. For ye showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. He spares the Kenites. The Kenites aren't the people that God wants him to destroy. So Saul is giving them a fair warning. Hey, get out of here because we're about to take care of business. And Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur. That is over against Egypt. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fatlings, and of the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. So do we see a problem here already? Notice, what did God tell him to do? What did God just tell Saul to do? He just told Saul to utterly destroy everybody in Amalek, right? Told him to destroy all the people, all the sheep, destroy everything. But we see right here in verse 9, he didn't do that, did he? He didn't kill the king, and he spoiled him. He kept a bunch of oxen and sheep and cattle. Let's see why he did this. This is wrong, but we'll see why. Verse number 10, then came the word of the Lord unto Samuel, saying, now remember, Samuel is the prophet, and Saul is the king, okay? The Lord is talking to Samuel. It repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king. God is changing his mind about setting up Saul. He said, I shouldn't have done it. Saul is not listening to what I told him to do. For he has turned his back from following me, and hath not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto the Lord all night. And when Samuel arose early to meet Saul in the morning, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul came to Carmel, and behold, he set him up a place, and is gone about, and passed on, and gone down to Gilgal. And Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said unto him, blessed be thou of the Lord, I have performed the commandment of the Lord. And Samuel said, What meaneth then this bleating of the sheep in mine ears, and the lowing of oxen which I hear? Saul, here's what's going on. Samuel shows up, and Saul says, hey, guess what? I did what God told me. Look, we wiped them out. And Samuel was like, you did, huh? Why am I hearing sheep bleating? Why am I hearing oxen moaning? What is all this noise then? If you wiped them out, if you utterly destroyed everything like God said, why do I hear all this noise? What is going on here? And Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites. He starts pushing it on somebody. He starts pushing it onto the people. He says, they have brought them from the Amalekites. For the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen, to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God. And the rest we have utterly destroyed, right? He said, now the people did this, but the reason we did this was because we're going to make a sacrifice to the Lord with it. You know, what Saul is doing here is he is not doing what the word of the Lord says to do. He is doing what he thinks is right in his own eyes. And he said, well, you know, God told me to utterly destroy everything, but what I'm going to do anyways is I'm going to take some of these oxen and some of these sheep, and I'm going to bring them as a sacrifice to the Lord. When God didn't say to do that. He said to wipe them off the face of the earth. And all of it. All the animals, all cattle, everything. And Saul didn't listen. And obviously, Saul is just making an excuse here because he kept all the oxen. All of them ain't going to be sacrifices. He's trying to spoil them and keep some stuff for himself, right? But he's making a big excuse. And you can see he's trying to push the excuse off onto the people. But he's the leader. Saul is the leader and the ruler in this place. It's on him to do what is right. Then Samuel said unto Saul, stay, and I will tell thee what the Lord hath said to me this night. And he said to him, say on. And Samuel said, when thou wast little in thine own sight, wast thou not made the head of the tribes of Israel? And the Lord anointed thee king over Israel? He's saying, hey, you're putting this blame on the people, but you're the king. God anointed you to rule. And the Lord sent thee on a journey, and said, go utterly and destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they be consumed. Wherefore then didst thou not obey the voice of the Lord, but didst fly upon the spoil, and didst evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said unto Samuel, yea, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone by the way which the Lord has sent me, and have brought Agag, king of the Amalekites, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the spoil, the sheep and oxen, the chief things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice to the Lord thy God in Gilgal. And Samuel said, hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. He's saying, yeah, this looks good that you want to make a sacrifice. I mean, I see that you think this looks good and this looks right, but what's better? To do what you think is right or to do what God tells you to do, right? You need to do what God says, not what you think is right in your own heart, Saul. God made you the leader of this people, and you are just totally dropping the ball right now and trying to make all these excuses and trying to say, well, I'm actually trying to do this, or the people said this, or the people are actually doing this, you know. It all falls on you, Saul. But look at verse 23. I want to point this out. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. Think about what that's saying. When you're rebellious to your parents, when you're rebellious to those in authority above you, this verse is telling us that rebelling against authority, God-given authority, or rebelling against the word of the Lord in this case, is as the sin of witchcraft. Like when you're in rebellion against authority, you might as well be over here playing with Ouija boards and trying to perform curses and hexes and flood potions, and I don't know what all these witchcraft people do. You know what I mean? But what he's saying is that is just as wicked as like drawing up demons and trying to be a witch or something. Being rebellious against authority is just as wicked as trying to draw up and talk to demons. Basically what he's saying. You know, and he's telling Saul that you have rebellion in your heart, and you have all this wickedness in your heart, and that is why God sends Saul an evil spirit, which I don't think we'll get to necessarily that today. But, you know, we today, as Americans in a society, you know, we kind of, you know, God is telling us to get rid of all this sin in our life and to do certain things in certain ways, but we make excuses, don't we? Just like Let me ask you this. All the things that you watch on your phones, all the shorts, all the videos, all the TikToks, would you, and you don't have to answer me, but you answer in your own heart. If Pastor Brent was sitting right beside you, would you watch all the same shorts? Or would you get embarrassed at some of those things you were watching? Would you?
Embarrassed.
Yeah. Right. Hey, I'm right there with you. So, so I get there too. And this is for me too, much as it is for you guys. I need to watch myself too. But you know what I mean? Like, we just kind of make excuses, don't we? Well, it's not that bad, or this ain't. But if we really, truly think about it, we know that it's not right. We know that it's a little bit embarrassing if the pastor was to sit there and watch some of the movies that we watch, or sit there with us and scroll through the Facebook feeds and things that we scroll through, right? And we kind of need to take this approach that we want to get all the sin out of our life. Now, it's not easier said than done, but some things aren't that hard to control, right? Just, hey, don't turn on that wicked movie, right? Think about this. Jesus Christ is with you at all times. The eyes of the Lord are ever beholding the evil and the good. So you can just pretend like Jesus is sitting on the couch with you. Hey, when I got one finger pointed at you, I got three pointed back at me, okay? I need this just as much as y'all. I need to listen to this too. When you're about to turn that movie on, think about, would you watch this movie with Jesus sitting here? Would you watch it with the pastor sitting here? Would you watch it with Brother Corey? Would you watch this? You know what I mean? I try to think about that sometimes. I need to do a lot better. But another thing, though, that I kind of want to draw attention to is the fact that he didn't slay the king. And he's kind of making it that he's making a fool of the king, and he didn't destroy everything. And we kind of give excuses today for people in authority. The people that kind of was giving Saul an excuse, and we give excuses to people in authority today. And kind of one person I want to point out is Donald Trump. Now, let me give you my politics, okay, before I go off on Donald Trump. God is not a Republican, but the devil is a Democrat. That's my politics right there. What I mean by that is I'm not necessarily, I don't check the Republican ticket, but I for sure am not a Democrat, okay? If you made me pick right now, Republican or Democrat, I would go ahead and check the Republican box. I'm for most of what Republicans stand for, and I don't really get into politics a whole lot, but we have a generation today, we have a world today that is not holding Donald Trump accountable for some of the things that he's doing, right? We have a very blasphemous president who says some very wicked things about the Lord our God, and we don't hold him accountable. But we'll give him an excuse. Well, he's making great financial decisions. Look how great he's doing with the country financially. Since when has that been a Christian marker? Since when have we cared about financial stability, right? The Lord takes care of us. We don't worry about things like that. That is not a marker for how blessed the nation is, as if it's doing financially okay. What about all the sin and wickedness creeping up in our life and in our world? It's just getting more wicked and more corrupt, and we have a president. Literally, somebody asked him, have you ever asked for forgiveness? Have you ever asked God for forgiveness? And you know what he said? This is Donald Trump's words. He said, no, I'll never ask for forgiveness. I just don't do anything that needs forgiveness. I don't do anything that I need forgiven for. That's the words of Donald Trump. And don't get me wrong. If you make me pick between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I'm going to take Donald Trump. But my point is he needs to be held accountable by the Christians and the Republicans in this world for some of the things that he's doing. They say, well, at least he's against abortion. Well, no, let me tell you this. He might be more against abortion than the others, but the abortion argument in this country has not been if we're going to kill children or not for a long time. The abortion argument has been where to draw the line. Pretty much the whole country agrees that it's okay to kill babies. Republicans and Democrats alike, they all agree it's okay to kill babies. It's just now, all they argue about is where they're going to draw the line. Is it going to be when it has a heartbeat? Is it going to be at 6 weeks? Is it going to be when it has arms and legs? That's all the argument is, right? For a long time, it is not, because here, and Brother Corey said this the other day in his abortion sermon, and it was a great sermon. He said this. He said, if you aren't against abortion from conception on, then you're not against abortion. Right? Because once a baby, we can prove in the Bible, I don't want to show you this, because I don't remember exactly where it's at, but there's a verse in Isaiah and a verse in the New Testament that proves, when you put them side by side, that a conceived sperm egg, like when the sperm conceives in the egg and conception takes place, that is a life. When that happens, that is a human life. That is a child, the Bible says. From that point on, if you kill that baby, that's abortion. That's murder. You're killing an innocent baby. But like I said, we've left the argument. Nobody's arguing about that. We're all up here like, is it a heartbeat? Is it the arms and legs? Does it feel pain at 6 weeks? You know what I mean? All this stuff. But like I said, like Corey said, if you're not against abortion from conception forward, you're not against abortion. So, Donald Trump, and they say he's against abortion. So here's what Donald Trump did. He becomes president, and he hears all these arguments about abortion. He says he's against abortion, but really what he does is he puts his finger in the air, and he's trying to figure out where to draw the line. The line needs to be drawn all the way back here at conception. But like I said, nobody's arguing that anymore. They're just deciding when it's okay to kill kids. Everybody thinks it's okay to kill kids. It's just when can you kill them and when can you not kill them. So Donald Trump can't decide where to draw the line. Because if you go too far up in age, the Republicans get mad at you. If you go too far down in age, the Democrats get mad at you. And he can't decide where to draw the line. So what does he do? He turns the power back over to the states. So the states can decide, and it gets him off the chopping block. It gets the decision out of his hands and back to the states. And we could kind of see this. Remember with Goliath? Remember, what did Goliath do? Goliath had a great idea, but it was for a facetious reason, right? Goliath said, hey, send one guy down that we can fight one-on-one, right? And this sounded like a good idea, and it was a good idea. That way only one person has to die. But Goliath, in his mind, was trying to fix the battle for himself, right? And Donald Trump is doing the same thing here. He's getting the decision off of him and onto the states. But still yet, I don't think that's a terrible idea. Let the states decide. Give more power to the states. I think the federal government has too much power anyways. So that's not a terrible idea, but it's the reason behind why he's doing it. And you'll see why I'm kind of upset about this here in just a minute. So he gives the power to the states. Now the states get to decide. But guess what happens? Some of the states, I think at least one, I can't remember how many. Some of the states, though, start deciding all the way back here. We're not going to kill babies, period. They draw the line where it's supposed to be drawn. And Donald Trump doesn't like that. And the whole country gets mad at Donald Trump for giving power to the states. And Donald Trump even gets mad at these states for drawing the line all the way back here. He says, no, well, what about rape? What about incest? The baby don't feel nothing here and here. Well, we can't draw that line right there. That's absolutely ridiculous. And now he wants to repeal that. He wants to bring the power back to the federal government because he don't like what the states are doing. Why? Because it made him look bad with his constituents. But what my whole point is that Donald Trump is just like Corey said, he's not against abortion. All he's against is abortion all the way up here, right? But if you are for abortion anywhere up here, you're not against abortion, right? Abortion, life begins at conception, and we can't sit here and argue about how old the baby is before we can kill it. We just don't kill babies, period. That's where the line needs to be drawn. I hope that made sense. But another thing they say about Donald Trump, listen, like I said, if I would have voted the last election, I would have voted for Donald Trump. I'm not saying that. But we need to hold him accountable. They say, well, at least he's against this homo, transphobic, minor attracted person's agenda, right? Well, he's not, though. He's not against the homo agenda. As a matter of fact, out of his own mouth said he has been better for the homo community than any other president before him. And he's right about that. He has hired more homos into the White House and did more for the homosexual community than any other president in our lifetime, Donald Trump. Now, we are holding Donald Trump as this religious president, like all the churches are looking to him for guidance and leadership. And some things he's doing okay financially, but we need to hold his feet to the fire for these other things. He needs to kill the king of the Amalekites. He needs to get rid of the sheep and the oxen. There's some things he's doing right, but he needs to get rid of all of it. We need to chop down this homo agenda that's destroying our children, right? We need to get rid of this abortion agenda that's killing babies. We need to stop arguing about when it's okay to kill babies and just say it's not okay to kill babies, period. And another part of that argument is rape and incest. Well, the woman shouldn't have to carry a baby if she's been raped. Well, here's the thing, though. The baby didn't do anything, right? The rapist did something. How about we kill the rapist? Don't kill the baby. The baby didn't do anything wrong. And I understand that'd be a terrible, terrible position for a girl to be in. I understand that. But the baby didn't do anything. The baby don't deserve to die. But this is what we're arguing about. We're arguing about when it's okay to kill children, when we just should be saying it's not okay to kill children at any point in time, period. But we need to hold our leaders accountable. We need to get in this book and proclaim what thus saith the Lord, and take a stand like I talked about last night, Daniel. Take a stand like David, And like I said, it's up to the young people. It's up to you guys. And last night when I was saying the older generation has let us down, I'm not talking about like your specific parents and grandparents, but we have great old people here at this church that we can look up to for guidance and leadership. But all around the country, we can just see it's getting terrible. It's getting worse and worse and worse. I don't know how many people I see. I've been working at Shawnee Lodge over on the west side, and it is amazing to me how many old homosexual men I see there. It's astounding. They're all older, and they always come in pairs, and you can tell. And there's these two the other day, and this dude was wearing, about puked. He was wearing the yoga pants. This old dude, like skin tight, all the butt crack yoga pants. It was the grossest thing, but it's just unbelievable. I remember growing up and looking up at the older people, and they had, they were kind of set in their ways, and no, we don't like homosexuality, and no, I'm staying married to the very end, I'm not going to go out and do this or that. We had old people in this country who had some wisdom, had some backbone, had some structure in their life, but that has left this world. Now, your immediate parents and grandparents, I'm not talking about them. But overall, in general, in America, we can see this just getting worse and worse, right? And it's up to the young people to take this country back. It's up to the young people to take a stand and say, I'm not going to put up with homosexuality. I'm not going to put up with abortion. I'm not going to put up, with people degrading my God and slandering and preaching a wrong gospel, and I'm going to preach the word of God, and I'm going to do what is right, and I'm going to keep myself holy and pure before the Lord, and I'm going to get rid of all the filth from the Amalekites, and I'm going to get rid of the king of the Amalekites, and I'm going to do what is right. All right, we'll pick up with this where we left off next week.